Hey everybody, today's deep dive is in the PNP systems. The PNP systems for immigrating to Canada, how they work, and what you need to know basically that all PNP systems have in common. So let's back it up and just explain what is a PNP. The average person trying to immigrate to Canada doesn't realize that we actually have 13 different immigration programs or systems, if you want to think of it that way, because every province has the right to decide their own immigration pathways. And this is written right into the highest level of our laws up and the Immigration Act. So because of that rule, there has been, over the last 20 years, the provinces, they create their own pathways, you would call them, to become a permanent resident. And these are known in our industry as the Provincial Nominee Programs, or the short form is PNP. So every province has one. That's the first thing you need to know about them, is that if you're going to immigrate to Canada and you're going to look at, going to a particular province, you'd be foolish not to investigate their PNP system, because often you'll find that there's an easier pathway to permanent residency in that PNP system than there would be competing against everybody else in the express entry system, which is by definition of itself, like, you're competing against everyone else in the whole world, and that is doing yourself a disservice, really, right? So when I work with people who are coming to Canada, the first time go-getters to come to Canada, I always tell them, where do you want to live? Like, where do you want to move? Because that's going to actually define where we're going to start to target pathways for permanent residency. So when people are saying things like, I don't really care where I live, I want to live in Canada, haven't really thought about it. But then I take that as someone who is not really serious about coming to Canada, because you haven't really taken the time to investigate, right, where you want to be. That's so important that knowing where you want to be, because that's going to dictate the relationship you have with your journey, right? If you take the first job offer you find and you end up in some place you don't like, cold, and you don't want to be there, you're going to have a bad experience, and then you're not going to want to fulfill your dream of becoming a Canadian citizen. So you have to work backwards from where you want to be, and then from there, naturally what happens is, for me, I always look at the PNP systems first and say, okay, well, if you're going to be in Alberta, for example, you're still going to need a job offer. You're still going to need, to get your education credential assessments, your language tests, all that kind of stuff. But the pathway itself, right, is going to be different for you, because in the express entry system, if you look at this from sort of a micro or macrocosmic view, the express entry system is competitive, right? Because you're dealing with everybody in the express entry pool, and then you have to reach a score, a cutoff score. And right now, in 2025, that score is the highest it's ever been. So the government of Canada is being so selective on who they invite to come to Canada and who becomes permanent residents, that often there is no pathway. There is no option for people, because you're competing against people who already are here with master's degrees, with years of experience working in Canada. So how do you bypass all that? How do you bypass that whole system, the federal express entry system, which is competitive, which is overpopulated, which is in its most, extreme, highly competitive state right now, right? And the answer to that is you go through the PNP systems. The PNP systems are, again, a bypass from the express entry system, because you can be nominated by the province. They give you basically a piece of paper that says, we choose you. We choose you to become our next permanent resident of this province. And that, by law, the government of Canada has to then, process you as a permanent resident. Now, let's kind of open up the PNPs. What do they all have in common, right? If you look at any PNP system, if you Google search for Alberta PNP or Saskatchewan PNP, BC PNP, Ontario PNP, you're going to find that most of them have one thing in common, which is, in order to be eligible for that program, you have to have a job offer from the employer in that province. And that's the key, because the whole philosophical reason why we have PNPs is because the province is getting something. They're getting a skilled immigrant into their province, but they're also helping out an employer who's also in that province. So it doesn't work if you are living in Ontario and then you want to move to BC and you say, I want to apply for the BC PNP, right? But I work in Ontario remotely, for example. There is no benefit to BC for that, right? You're working as a remote worker for Ontario. It makes no sense why you would have, someone in the nomination system for that province if they're not intending to live there. So rule number one is you have to intend to live in the province that you're being nominated by. Now, what does that really mean? Because a lot of people will say, well, how long do I have to live there? If I'm going to go through all this work to get my job offer, to get my nomination, but I don't really want to be there, how long do I have to be there? Well, you definitely have to be there during the processing time of the nomination, which can take, up to 2 years in some cases. And then from there, it's advisable that you stay in that province for at least 1 year after you become a PR. And the reason for that is because the province, has the right to audit and review anything they want to in terms of their immigration pathways, their programs, their previous approvals. If it's found out that the purpose of you coming to that province was just to get permanent residence, and then when you got permanent residence you were going to leave, then you're actually going against the purpose and the sort of the what your commitment was when you made that promise to the PNP system. You have to basically declare that you are willing to settle in that province, right? So 1 year is a reasonable amount of time to stay in the province after you've become a PR. There isn't a set rule on that. It's not like someone's going to say, it's written that you have to, spend this much time in that province after you become a PR. Some people move right away and they get away with it, but if that was your intention all along, then it speaks back to the original application when you said you checked a box at some point saying that you intend to live in that province, when in actual fact you didn't, which means you misrepresented yourself, which means that everything can come crashing down, right? The nomination can be withdrawn, and then your PR status can be withdrawn as well. Anyway, so rule number one, you have to intend to live in the province that you are being nominated by. And the second thing that most PNPs have in common is that they all require job offers from employers that are in that province. Okay. And the offer of employment in most cases has to be in specific job sectors. Like, this is the great thing about PNPs. They have actually within them multiple different streams. So there's like the skilled worker stream. There's the international graduate stream. There's the entrepreneurial stream, which is a whole nother topic in itself. There's in-demand skills streams. There's so every province, because they have a different economic, factors to consider, they have different streams. So in Ontario, you're going to have people that the PNP prioritizes healthcare workers, for example, because in Ontario, they're really struggling to get healthcare workers. In BC, it targets tech workers, right? So there's particular streams within those PNP systems that you can target. So again, it speaks to the need to do some research and investigation and planning before you just hop on an airplane and come and live in Canada, because you could save yourself a lot of time and trouble and effort and money if you just knew what you were going to target. And often this coincides with job offers. Like I said, most PNPs require the job offer. That's a requirement. It's not like you get to say, okay, I'm going to move to the province, then I'll get a job offer after. You have to get a job offer in order to be eligible for those programs. So often they coincide with other things that are happening in your immigration journey. So you could be, on an open work permit. You could be transferred in on another work permit. You could be, on a spousal open work permit, and you get a job offer. Like you're working at, say you're working at a restaurant as a manager. And you think nothing of it. You think, okay, I'm just going to work and I'm going to eventually immigrate through the federal express entry system, because that's what you learn about. That's what you've been reading online. That's what you think that only pathway, only option is. What you fail to actually understand is that that job offer that you got could actually be applied to that nomination, that PNP system that you're in. And not all PNP systems are equal. Some, and they're all structured differently as well. I mean, like, it's really just like opening up an encyclopedia, because there's so many different chapters and different, versions of itself. It's hard for one like myself to explain every pathway to everybody at the same time. So this is why you need to engage a professional, so that you understand, A, I've chosen my province. B, I have a job offer. Now what? Now what am I eligible for in this PNP? So those job offers often translate to pathways to permanent residency in the PNP systems, where they don't necessarily translate to pathways to residency in the express entry system, because you're competing on a different level. And you don't necessarily have to be in the express entry system to get the nomination. This is very good for people who are maybe ineligible for express entry. Maybe they have, their age, they're too old, or they don't have a decent education, and they don't get enough points just to get into the express entry system. So how would they ever become permanent residents? Well, the only other way is to go to the nominations, the PNPs, which don't require you to be in express entry. So you get to apply for PR without even having to go through the express entry system. I'll say that one more time. You get to apply for PR without using express entry. Okay. It's a huge benefit, and it's a back door in many cases. And the provinces love it, because they want to choose who they select for their provinces, because they're matching skilled workers to employers in those provinces, and it's filling labor shortages, and it's helping their economies boom. And it's highly successful, hugely important program for our immigration system. So sometimes in a PNP, they are actually points-based within themselves. So we know the federal express entry system is points-based. You have to get a certain score and all that kind of stuff. And for example, the BC PNP is also its own points-based system. So if you want to get that nomination to bypass the express entry system, you're still competing in a points-based pool, which is frustrating for some people, because, then they're up against another wall, because that can be competitive in itself. Right now, the BC PNP is highly competitive. In fact, all PNPs are. This is just the theme of what's happening in 2025 right now, because of our influx of temporary residents in the pandemic. We have more temporary residents than we want to. So the PNP systems are being highly selective on who they take in. But that doesn't mean you're not eligible. Again, you work backwards from the job offer, and you say, okay, will this be a job offer that I can use for this PNP system? And so if it's a points-based system, right, you can pre-calculate your score. You can say, okay, if I took this job, I've got this great offer of employment. If I took this job, how many points would I have? Would I have enough to be selected in the current PNP system? Other PNPs, ones that are less competitive, they don't need those point-based systems. They just have basic eligibility. So they say, instead of reaching a certain score and us selecting you from a pool, if you can do this, then we will automatically give you the nomination. So if you have a job offer, if you've worked in that job offer for a year, if you have more than a high school education and you speak English, sometimes that's all it takes, right? But again, these PNP systems are limited by federal-based quotas. So, Nova Scotia is a good one, for example. I love the Nova Scotia PNP because it's so simple. They basically say, okay, if you've worked in the job for 12 months in any position, whether it's skilled level 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, it doesn't matter. You get to apply for permanent residency if the employer wants to keep you. It's great. It's wonderful. It's like the best PNP, because it's basically just an open door for people that have job offers in the Nova Scotia province. But they're limited by a quota of how many they can accept per year. And in 2025, we're already at that quota. We were at that quota in like February. So basically we're waiting out the rest of 2025 to see what's going to happen in terms of the quota. Is it going to go up? Is it going to stay the same? What's going to happen, right? So, the key takeaway here in this little bit is PNPs are in my opinion, the easiest and the best pathway for permanent residency. Some of them are points-based, some of them are not. Every PNP is, in most cases, requires a job offer. There are very few PNPs that don't require job offers. The ones that don't, they are very unique. Like you have to have graduated from one of their schools in the provinces with a PhD, for example, right? So that only talking to a very select few people. In BC, they have a non-job offer stream if you are a doctor or a nurse who, is certified, right? So you can go direct. Then there's the entrepreneur pathways, right? Every PNP system also has an entrepreneur pathway. So these are for business people who want to buy existing businesses or start new ones. Obviously, you're going to create economic development. You're going to actually, hire people. You're going to invest money. So you're going to give the economy in that province a boost, and that's the payoff. That's what the province gets. Instead of just handing you over a nomination so you can get your PR, you're actually doing something to the economic development of the province. Entrepreneur pathways are great if you are serious about starting a business in conjunction with becoming a PR. But, if you want to save yourself, a bunch of money and time and effort, then it's easier just to get a job offer in an area that you're qualified in and go from there. But sometimes you're dealing with provinces like my initial point, where do you want to live? So, I have clients that come to me and they say, okay, I want to live in BC. I want to live in Vancouver area. So right away, I'm thinking, okay, they would have to have a very, very good profile in order to be selected for the BC PNP. Because it's so competitive right now, they have to have a job offer that's going to pay them over $150,000. They have to have a master's degree, and they have to have about 10 years experience in that job they're being offered. So we're talking about a very few select people who will be eligible for that. But, the entrepreneur pathways, well, that's an open door. Like if you want to go invest $300,000 and start a business and hire a bunch of people, the province is going to say, yeah, totally. We love that. Right. Of course, there's other requirements you have to meet, in that pathway as well. But, you get to bypass the points-based system. And so for some people, the entrepreneur pathways are the only available option if they're serious about becoming a permanent resident. But you work backwards from where you want to be. If you want to be in that province and you are a business person, you have the net worth, you have the investment, you have the effort, the time, and the energy to do it. It's a great program. It's an awesome program for that. And all PNPs, all provinces have these entrepreneurial pathways. So entrepreneurs take advantage of the PNPs because they are a direct pathway to permanent residency. Whereas if you were to start a business and get a work permit through a federal program, you're not guaranteed you're going to get enough points to get PR because you're still going to have to go through the express entry system. And now, just recently, they've taken away what are called arranged employment points. So in the past, we could have gotten these entrepreneurs more points in the express entry system. But now they're not doing that anymore. So you're basically stuck in this, never-ending cycle of just getting a work permit and that's it. That's on the federal side, right? But if you target the PNP systems and an entrepreneur, then you get direct pathways to permanent residency. So PNPs in 2025 have been a bit of a gong show. Like, to be honest, they are not a viable pathway right now. But that is going to change. It's going to change probably as we approach summer and early fall, because we're going to start to see the overall numbers of temporary residents go down. Either they're going to start to be invited to permanent residence programs, or they're going to leave the country. And that's when the new quotas are going to open up, and all the provinces will decide what their new quotas are, and they're going to set their quotas for 2026, and they're going to start inviting more people to apply. So if you're a newcomer to Canada, or if you're interested to immigrate to Canada, then it's very, very important that you, first of all, decide where you want to be, and then investigate those PNP systems. You just need to Google search it. Just Google search the Manitoba PNP, the Nova Scotia PNP, and then read through all the different streams and say, okay, which ones am I eligible for, right? Make note of them, right? And now your job is to look for an offer of employment, because that's the key factor in all the PNPs. You need to have an offer of employment first. When you get the offer of employment, by the way, and you process the initial part of the nomination, the province gives you a letter to get a work permit, which is wonderful, right? That's what you're after. You're after the work permit so you can come over and live in that province and start working in the job. And then after that, they process a nomination and you apply for permanent residency. It's as simple as that. Get a job offer, meet the requirements, get the nomination, apply for permanent residency. So you can even do this even without being in Canada. Back before COVID, when the PNP systems were vibrantly, accepting people and had, what seemed to be unlimited quotas, we could actually match people with job offers before they even came to Canada, get them work permits and get them PR basically in record time, 6 months, right? But these days it's obviously way more competitive. And so, but what I'm trying to tell people, the message is that, don't get discouraged. Look around the province, look around the country, especially for people that are coming to Canada for the first time. If you're already here and you're thinking, okay, I run out of options, I don't know what to do anymore, I understand. I feel for you, because it's tough times right now if you're on an expiring work permit and you don't have a PR pathway. But if you're new to Canada or if you're thinking about coming, right, my first tip is decide where you want to be. Right? Don't just say, I want to come to Canada. That's too broad. We cannot help you there in terms of assessing you for PNPs. Decide where you want to be and then start to look at their PNP systems and then aggressively look for offers of employment, because that's going to be the trigger that allows you to start the PNP. Okay. People are going to have some comments. I hope you do. I hope you have a question for me or a comment about your experience in the PNP system. I hope that you can leave me something to chew on so I can get back to you and answer all your questions. I also want to hear from you. What do you want to know, about your journey in the immigration landscape in Canada? If I can be of help in any way, let me know in the comments and I'll post a video on that for sure. Lots of other content coming your way in the coming weeks and months. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the summer of 2025. Hopefully that's going to happen. Don't forget to like and follow and leave me a comment, and I'll see you next time.